when Barack Obama got in front of a Muslim nation and he said that America is no longer a Christian nation. Well, I hate to tell the president that we are a Christian nation and we will always be a Christian nation. That is what we're about in this country. But when all these things were going on, when faith was being compromised, where was the Congress of the United States? What have they done to stand up for American freedom? What have they done in the face of the Supreme Court who's making up things that aren't there? There's nothing about a wall of separation between church and state in our Constitution. They lifted it out of a letter somebody wrote years after the Constitution was ratified. That's not what America has. History's all about. It's not what we should put up with. What is Congress going to do about this? What is Congress going to do? When the family was destroyed at so many levels of our society, when they began to say in the 1960s, the Great Society days, that we could take the fathers out of homes and we could substitute fathers for government benefits and everything would be okay. Well, all the chaos in society and all the huge governmental costs and problems that we deal with, not only in Washington, but in Columbus and Lowndes County, because fathers aren't in homes today and children aren't raised in the plan that will work, the plan of Genesis 1 and 2. We're looking at things like that today, and where was Congress when all of this has been going on for years and years and years? What have they done when they realized they made great errors back in the days of the Great Society? They tried social engineering and it didn't work. We've got to have fathers in the home. We've got to have men in the home to guide their children. That's the plan of the Bible and it won't work any other way. What did Congress do? What did they do? When the Supreme Court told us 4 years ago that we have a personal right to bear arms, but they only said that we have it by a 5-4 vote. 4 justices on the Supreme Court have said that we do not have a personal right to bear arms. Today, we're safe. But when Barack Obama gets to replace one of the 4 conservatives on that court, or Anthony Kennedy, and we have a runaway liberal Supreme Court, what are we going to do within Congress? What are they going to do to take a step to stop this kind of thing in this country? We've got a $12.5 trillion national debt that's going to explode to $25 trillion in less than 10 years. That was projected before Obamacare. Now that they're going to give health care free to millions of people and subsidize it for millions of more, what's that cost going to be? What's the national debt going to be after that? Are we going to lose freedom when interest rates go sky high and inflation runs off? What are we going to do in this country, and what is the Congress going to do? They're the ones that ran up the debt to bring us to this point where we are now with this terrible economic problem that confronts us. What will Congress do? What will they do? What will they do with Obamacare? Will they try to stop it? Will we have them say, well, it's just too late, it's another entitlement, everybody expects it, and we're just going to have to give it away anyway? What will the Congress do? What are they going to do while we export 65% of the energy we use in this country from Venezuela, Russia, OPEC, and places like that, and bring it into this country when we have vast reserves of our own oil under federal lands and we can't get to it? What will Congress do? They haven't done anything for over 30 years. They've let us get in this shape. What are they going to do? What are they going to do when that supply is cut off, when something happens overseas? Does anybody remember 1973? Does anybody remember 1978? Did you stand in oil lines then? And we parked there waiting to get gas? What are we going to do when that happens again, but it's worse? In 1973, we only imported 25% of the oil we use. Today, it's 65%. We're more dependent on the overseas people than we ever have been before. And at the same time, Republicans as well as Democrats have sat around and let this happen to this country. One more thing about this. What are we going to do when Barack Obama brings 5 of the world's worst terrorists into the United States and he and Eric Holder treat them like common house burglars and give them every constitutional right that everybody here I'm looking at has? They ought to be kept overseas. They ought to be kept at Guantanamo. They need to be tried in military tribunals, and they need to be met with swift American justice. That's the way to deal with terrorism. It's not to give them special rights. It's time to deal with our problems. Faith, family, and freedom in this country. These pillars are being compromised, and if we don't have a Congress that'll go up there and stand up for the pillars of American society, a Congress that will go up there and take some chances and go back to what the founders had in mind. We're going to lose this country. We're going to lose it. But we can save it if we do some different things. We can save it if we have a Congress that will go up there and bring us back to God-centered, limited, constitutional government, where we have rights, but we have responsibilities. Responsibilities to our nation and to our families. But government has responsibilities to us to follow the Constitution and not bankrupt the country. We need to quit spending more money than we have. Let's quit spending money. Let's freeze the federal budget. Let's quit spending more money next year than we did last year and the year before. Let's do it before Obama blew up the budget in the first place last year. Let's go back to the levels we had before that, freeze it, but let's cut federal taxes, just like Ronald Reagan did, John Kennedy and others. Let's cut it, George W. Bush, let's cut it and watch the economy boom and explode and do very well and put people back to work. And quit spending more money and let the revenues overtake the outlays and start paying down the national debt. Does this sound unreasonable to you? Does this sound like what you want for America? Yeah. Let's do it then. Let's send a different breed to the United States Congress. The career politicians aren't going to do it. Republican as well as Democrat have presided over this stuff for 50 years, and look where we are now. We turned to career politicians. We need to turn to something else now. We need conservative fighters who will go to Washington and get us back on the path of freedom. And if I go up there, there's some things I'd like to do. I'd like to have a federal constitutional amendment and define marriage in this country between a man and a woman, period. All over this nation. That just sounds like common sense to all of us. George Bush proposed to do that in 2004. But the Republican Congress stopped it. It didn't even get out of committee. Now, I'm running as a Republican for the U.S. Congress, but I want to tell you, we need a new breed up there. We need people who will go back to common sense and biblical values. I think we need a federal constitutional amendment to limit congressional terms and say after 12 years, you've been there long enough, you need to go back home. Go back and find out what America's all about. Columbus, Mississippi, and Eupora, where I'm from. Don't get up there and decide it's all about you and it's not about the country. It is about the country. It's not about the politicians in Washington. A constitutional term limit would stop that. If we amend the Constitution, there's nothing anybody can do to change it. It'll be fixed. That's what we need. We need, of course, I just mentioned, to freeze federal spending and cut taxes. That's the way to put the economy back on the right track, put people back to work. We need courageous people to get up there and do that. A lot of people can say it can't be done now. Well, absolutely it can. It needs to be done right now. Finally, we need congressmen who will go to Washington, D.C., and when a Supreme Court decides they're not going to follow the Constitution, they're going to get away from what it says and what the founders intended for it to say, and they're going to make it up on their own. Well, they can do that, but we'll have a U.S. Congress that will impeach them and take them out of office. Follow the Constitution or we'll get rid of you. We'll find people that can. Now, no Republican wants to talk about these things. I'm the only Republican in this race that's talking about term limits. The other two say they don't want any part of that. I'm the only Republican in this race that says anything about impeaching a Supreme Court justice. Career politicians run from this kind of stuff. They don't want to say that. They might lose an election. But it's not about whether you win or lose an election. It's about whether you go to Washington, D.C. and do what's right. If we'll do what's right and we follow the Constitution, we can save America. Career politicians run from term limits. That's the last thing in the world they want. Term limits. They want to ride the train, the gravy train. You provide the gravy and they stay on the train and they ride it and ride it and ride it. It's time to get them off. It's time to send them home. We need to do something different in America. This is a country worth saving. Let's save it today. Help me get there. On June the 1st, vote for Henry Ross for United States Representative. Help me go to Washington. Help me change this country. We need a lot of other good people, but let's start here in the 1st District.